I worked a brutal 14-hour shift at the hospital, only to unlock my front door and find my entire house completely empty. My entitled younger sister had broken in and stolen every single piece of furniture I owned. She left a sticky note on the bare hardwood floor that read, "We need it more than you do. Thanks." She genuinely expected me to break down, cry, and call her screaming. I didn't text her. I didn't call her. I just sat on the floor, calculated the value of what she took, and quietly handed her a Class B felony. Before we dive into how I completely dismantled my sister's life, do me a massive favor. Hit that subscribe button and welcome to Peegyn. Drop a comment right now telling me what city or country you're watching from. We upload the most insane, satisfying Reddit stories every single day. Now let's get into it. I came home to an echo. That is honestly the only accurate way I can describe the sensation. I put my key in the deadbolt, pushed my heavy front door open, and the sound of my own work boots hit the floorboards, bounced off the empty drywall, and came back to me like a haunting question. The expensive leather couch was gone. The television was gone. The heavy, hand-carved oak dining table that my grandmother had personally restored this summer before she passed away was gone. The area rugs, the floor lamps, the microwave. Even the expensive blender I had used exactly twice had been stripped from the kitchen counter. The massive stainless steel refrigerator had been dragged out, leaving a perfectly clean, dust-free rectangular outline on the kitchen tile where it had proudly stood for 3 years. It was a ghost. A terrifying, physical reminder of a life that used to be there. I stood completely frozen in the dead center of my empty living room in my blue nursing scrubs. It was 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was exactly 14 hours into an ER shift that had already drained every single ounce of empathy I had in my body. And then I looked down. Sitting perfectly in the center of the bare floor was a single sheet of white notebook paper. Written in blue ink was my sister's handwriting. The exact same looping, bubbly cursive she had been using since the 7th grade. "We need it more than you do. Thanks, Riley." It wasn't signed with love. It was just signed with her name, like an arrogant receipt. I read the note twice. I didn't scream. I didn't burst into tears. I calmly folded the piece of paper perfectly in half, slipped it into the chest pocket of my scrubs, and sat down hard on the empty floor. I sat in the deafening quiet of a house that used to be mine, and I thought about exactly how long I was willing to wait to destroy her. I was going to wait a lot longer than she expected. That much I already knew. To understand why this betrayal was so catastrophic, you need to understand who Riley is and what I had sacrificed for her. I've been an ER trauma nurse for 6 grueling years when this happened. It is the kind of brutal profession where you learn incredibly quickly that the human body has absolute limits, and most people discover those limits at the absolute worst possible moment. I was 32 years old. I drove a beat-up sedan with 80,000 miles on it and a massive crack in the windshield. But I owned my 3-bedroom house completely outright. I bought it with the money I had been religiously saving since I was 22. I skipped vacations, I ate rice and beans for dinner, and I aggressively budgeted every single penny, telling myself the stability would eventually be worth it. And it was worth it, until Riley arbitrarily decided that my stability belonged to her. Riley was 28. She was 4 years younger than me. Our mother completely checked out of parenting when I was 10 years old. Because of that, I was the one who practically raised Riley. I made sure she had lunch money. I washed her clothes. I was the only person who ever showed up to her middle school plays. She was my project. She was my pride. She was the one human being on earth I would have done absolutely anything for. Almost anything. 3 years ago, Riley married Jason. Jason was a certified grifter. He was the kind of man who had a convenient, bulletproof excuse for absolutely everything. There was a reason he got fired from his job. There was a reason his landlord was being unfair. There was a reason this new cryptocurrency investment was going to make him a millionaire. He was charming, but it was an exhausting charm. You had to actively force yourself to believe his lies. Riley actively chose to believe him for 3 years. Exactly 3 months before they cleared out my house, Riley called me hysterically crying. They were facing immediate eviction. They were going to end up homeless on the street if they couldn't come up with $2,500 in less than 10 days. I wired them the money in 48 hours. It was the exact cash I had been saving for 2 years to finally replace my broken-down car. I wired it to them with absolutely zero conditions. No promissory note. No contract. I just begged them to let me know when they finally got back on their feet. They replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. That was the last acknowledgement I ever received. 2 months of absolute silence followed. And then I got 2 text messages in the exact same week. First, Riley texted asking if I had received their holiday card in the mail. I hadn't. Then Jason texted me, casually asking if I happened to have any extra cash lying around because an unexpected emergency had popped up. I completely ignored Jason's text. I told Riley I hadn't gotten the card, and I let the conversation completely die. I should have recognized the psychological warfare right then and there. The holiday card was a test. The silence was a calculation. They were desperately trying to figure out exactly how much I still cared about them and what that emotional attachment was worth in cold, hard cash. I failed the test by not realizing I was taking one. If you have a toxic family member who constantly drains your bank account and never says thank you, smash the like button right now to show some support for Hannah. Let's get revenge. Sitting on the floor of my empty living room, I didn't panic. I executed 4 highly specific, methodical actions. First, I pulled out my cell phone and hit record. I walked through every single room of my house, recording high-definition video of the theft. The empty closets, the barren kitchen, the master bathroom where they had actually taken the time to unbolt the metal towel racks from the drywall. They hadn't just grabbed a TV and run. They had been incredibly thorough. This required tools. This required a massive moving truck. This was not a panic crime of opportunity. This was a highly calculated operation. Second, I called Liam. Liam and I went to the same high school. He was a quiet, hyper-intelligent kid who went on to become a ruthless corporate defense attorney. We had stayed loosely in touch over the years, and people save phone numbers for a reason. Liam, I said the second he answered the phone. My sister broke into my house while I was at the hospital and stole every single piece of furniture I own. She left a handwritten note confessing to it. There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could literally hear his brain shifting from friend mode into lawyer mode. Read me the note. Hannah, Liam commanded. I read it to him verbatim. Hannah, that is grand larceny, Liam stated coldly. Depending on the total financial value of what was taken, we are looking at a Class C or Class B felony. You have the absolute legal right to pursue aggressive criminal charges. Being related by blood does not magically create a legal exception for burglary. My chest violently tightened. Not because I didn't know she was wrong, but because hearing a lawyer categorize my sister's actions as a felony made it irreversible. It wasn't just a sticky note anymore. It was prison time. What do you need me to do? I asked. I need a complete, itemized inventory of everything taken, with estimated replacement values, Liam instructed. I need the video you just took. Put the note in a plastic bag to preserve the fingerprints. And most importantly, Hannah, patience. Do not contact them. Do not reply to their texts. Let them drown in the silence. It becomes vital leverage later. I hung up the phone. Third, I called a 24-hour emergency locksmith. I paid the exorbitant $300 after-hours fee to have every single deadbolt in my house instantly rekeyed. It occurred to me that Riley had used her spare key, the emergency key I had trusted her with 3 years ago. The definition of emergency had apparently been aggressively expanded to include, we want to steal your couch. Fourth, I drove to a massive 24-hour superstore. I bought an air mattress, a sleeping bag, a cheap coffee maker, and $40 worth of basic groceries. Because whatever happened next, I was going to eat, I was going to sleep, I was going to go to work, and I was absolutely not going to give those parasites the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I inflated the air mattress in the center of my empty master bedroom. I opened my laptop, began typing out the meticulous inventory list for my lawyer, and I waited. The frantic text messages started rolling in exactly at midnight. Hannah, we really need to talk. Can you please call me? "Hey Hannah, it's Jason. We just want to explain the situation. Please call us back." "Hannah, please. I know you are awake. You are always awake after your ER shifts. Please just hear us out. I'm so sorry." I read every single message as it came in. I set my phone face down on the floor. I stared up at the empty ceiling and I smiled. They knew my exact hospital schedule. They knew I worked a massive 12-hour shift on Tuesdays. They had perfectly timed the robbery, assuming I would come home physically and emotionally exhausted, completely off balance, and vulnerable to manipulation. Every single piece of this betrayal had been mapped out. That was the part that kept my eyes wide open until 4 a.m. My own sister had evaluated her miserable life, evaluated my stable one, and maliciously decided that the math worked out in her favor if she just stole everything I had worked for. And she knew that if she had asked me for the furniture, I would have said no. So she didn't ask. The self-control required to not respond to those texts was agonizing. I'm not a cold sociopath. The human instinct to pick up the phone, scream at the top of my lungs, and demand an explanation lived inside my chest like a rabid animal. But Liam's advice echoed in my head. Let them wonder. He was absolutely right. Riley had heavily banked on me, responding immediately with blind, messy rage. She wanted me to explode so she could deflect the blame and play the victim. A screaming match has two sides. Absolute, suffocating silence only has one. So I stayed silent. And somewhere across the city, my sister and her loser husband were sitting in a cheap apartment completely filled with my stolen furniture, staring at a phone that refused to ring, slowly realizing they had made a fatal miscalculation. By the second day, my itemized spreadsheet was flawless. I had documented exactly 52 missing items. I pulled the serial numbers and digital purchase receipts from my email archives. The estimated replacement value of the stolen goods was $18,400. And that was being incredibly conservative. The hand-carved oak dining table from my grandmother didn't have a replacement value, but I had an antique appraisal document from 4 years ago pricing it at exactly $3,200. I called Liam and gave him the final number. $18,000 puts you solidly into Class C Felony territory, Hannah, Liam stated. That carries a maximum sentence of up to 5 years in state prison. On the morning of the third day, I marched into the county sheriff's office and sat down across the desk for Detective Russo. Detective Russo was a hardened, no-nonsense investigator who handled high-value property crimes. She had 15 years on the force, and she possessed a terrifying gaze that made you feel like you were both the victim and the prime suspect. She listened to my entire story without taking a single note. When I finished, she reviewed the iPhone footage. She examined Riley's handwritten note through the plastic Ziploc bag. She scrutinized my $18,000 spreadsheet. "This value estimate is heavily conservative," Detective Russo muttered, tapping her pen. "I'm going to verify the antique table's appraisal. At that value, it pushes the felony classification into a much more severe bracket." She looked up at me. "Hannah, I'm going to ask you a question off the official record," Russo said. "How do you want this to end? Are we using the threat of a police warrant as leverage to force them to return your property? Or do you want them in handcuffs?" I had been laying on a cheap air mattress for 3 days thinking about this exact question. I thought about the little girl I had bathed, fed, and cheered for. The girl I had loaned my car savings to. "I want to file the official police report," I said coldly. "Whatever the legal system decides to do with them after that is out of my hands." Detective Russo slowly nodded. Let the process do its job. She filed the felony report that exact afternoon. At exactly 9:17 a.m. on the third day of my silence, my cell phone rang. It was Riley. I let it ring 4 times. Not for dramatic effect, but because I needed those 4 rings to make absolutely certain my voice was completely devoid of emotion before I answered. "Hello," I said. "Hannah." Riley sobbed into the receiver. Her voice was thick and wet, the pathetic sound of someone who had been hyperventilating for hours. "Hannah, please, I need you to hear me. You have to understand." I said absolutely nothing. "We were so desperate," she cried. "I know it isn't an excuse, but Jason lost his job again, and the landlord was going to evict us. I thought I thought if we just took the expensive furniture, we could sell some of it online, pay our rent, and then buy you new stuff later. I thought you would never even. She abruptly stopped talking. I think she finally heard her own psychotic logic out loud. You would never even notice. Hannah, please say something, Riley begged. We have been calling you for 3 days. We are terrified. Jason thinks you called the cops. Did you call the police? I let the dead air hang between us for 5 brutal seconds. Riley, I said, my voice completely flat. My grandmother's hand-carved dining table. Do you still have it? Or did you sell it to a pawn shop? Dead silence on her end. We still have it, she whispered. We couldn't sell it. It felt wrong. A terrifying, dark emotion moved through my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the specific, horrifying grief of realizing she knew exactly how evil her actions were, and she did it anyway. I'm going to text you an address, I commanded. You're going to rent a moving truck. You're going to bring every single item back to my house. And then you and Jason are going to sit down in my living room with my lawyer, and we're going to have a conversation about your future. Hannah, that is the only option on the table today. Riley, I interrupted. It will absolutely not be on the table tomorrow. They arrived that Saturday morning, driving a rented U-Haul truck. Riley couldn't even look me in the eye when she walked through my front door. She stared at the floorboards like a beaten dog. Jason arrogantly tried to shake my hand. I stared at his hand until he awkwardly lowered it. Liam, my lawyer, was sitting in the corner of my living room holding a legal pad. He wore the terrifyingly neutral expression of a man who destroys lives for a living. It took them 3 hours of agonizing physical labor to carry everything back inside. The couch, the refrigerator, the grandmother's table. Out of the 52 items they stole, they returned 41. 11 expensive appliances and electronics had already been pawned for cash. Liam stood up. He placed a printed document on the kitchen counter. He forced Riley and Jason to sign a legally binding, itemized acknowledgement of the missing property. He also forced them to sign a promissory note for $5,400, the exact replacement value of the sold items. Liam had orchestrated this strategy flawlessly. If they physically signed the promissory note, Liam had explained to me the night before, they are admitting absolute, undeniable culpability in writing. It is a signed confession. It doesn't magically close out the criminal complaint, but they are stupid enough to think that signing it will make the police go away. He was right. They eagerly signed it, thinking they had just escaped a felony. They were dead wrong. The criminal complaint aggressively moved forward. Detective Russo called me 3 weeks later to inform me that Riley and Jason had been formally interrogated. Jason had panicked and hired a cheap strip mall defense attorney who normally handled minor DUI cases. He was vastly underqualified for a major felony theft ring. The district attorney assigned to our case was a woman named Carter. She had an undefeated record prosecuting massive property crimes. DA Carter called me directly. Hannah, I'm going to be entirely transparent with you, the DA said. The promissory note your lawyer forced them to sign is the nail in their coffin. It establishes undeniable proof that she stole the property without your consent, combined with the handwritten sticky note she left at the crime scene. This is the most self-incriminating slam-dunk felony case I have seen in a decade. What are they facing? I asked. We are formally charging them both with grand larceny in the 2nd degree, she replied. It carries up to 4 years in state prison. However, because they returned the majority of the property and signed the debt agreement, we are likely looking at a strict plea deal. 5 years of heavy probation, mandatory community service, immediate restitution payments. If they violate a single term of their probation, they instantly go to a prison cell. What about the $2,500 cash loan they stole from me 3 months ago? I asked. That is a separate civil matter, the DA explained. Take them to small claims court. So I did. Liam filed the small claims lawsuit the very next week. He sued them for the $2,500 loan, plus maximum allowable interest, plus all of my legal and filing fees. Jason actually tried to stand up in front of the civil judge and argue that the money had been a loving family gift. Liam silently pulled out printed screenshots of Jason's own text messages that explicitly read, "This is a loan. We swear we will pay you back." The judge aggressively slammed his gavel and awarded me the maximum financial payout in less than 11 minutes. The criminal sentencing hearing took place on a rainy Wednesday morning in March. I wore the exact same sharp black blazer I use for hospital job interviews. I sat perfectly still in the back row of the massive courtroom. Riley and Jason walked in with their chief defense attorney. Riley's hair was messy. She looked incredibly small. She looked like a woman whose arrogant delusions had finally been violently crushed by reality. She turned around and looked at me across the courtroom. Just once. I didn't look away. I didn't glare. I didn't smile. I just held her terrified gaze long enough for her to fully understand that I was the one who put her in that room. The silence she had mistaken for weakness was actually the sound of me building her coffin. She looked away first. The judge accepted the plea deal. Both of them were officially convicted of grand larceny. 18 months of severe probation. 300 hours of brutal community service. Mandatory financial restitution to the court. Jason stared at his shoes. Riley sat trembling in her chair long after the gavel dropped. I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. Riley called me 4 months later. There was no hysterical crying this time. Just a quiet, completely broken voice. The voice of someone who had spent 120 days picking up trash on the side of the highway in an orange vest. "I'm not calling to ask for anything, Hannah," Riley whispered. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm so profoundly sorry. Not as a manipulation tactic. Not because Jason told me to. But because I've been sitting with what I did to you, and I can't even justify it to myself anymore." I listened in silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she choked out. "I know I burned that bridge to the ground. I thought about the little girl I had carried on my hip. The girl I had packed school lunches for. The girl who had stood in my living room, stared at my grandmother's table, and coldly calculated whether it was worth more cash than my love. I know you are sorry, Riley," I finally said. "And that's it for now. Do not call me again." I hung up the phone. Trust is not a light switch. It is a grueling, years-long process, and honestly, I don't know if I ever want to start it. But what I do know is this. My house is completely full again. The grandmother's table is sitting perfectly in the dining room. The refrigerator hums happily in the kitchen. 3 months after the hearing, I finally bought my new car. A gorgeous, dark blue 2026 Honda Civic. No cracks in the windshield. I paid for it completely in cash. With the money, I didn't let a parasite steal from me this time. The money stayed in my bank account because I had finally learned the agonizing lesson that some toxic family members can only teach you by trying to take everything you have. I parked the new car in my driveway, walked inside my secure, fully furnished house, and smiled. The echo was permanently gone. If you think Hannah executed the most perfect legal revenge of all time, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Leave a comment rating this revenge from 1 to 10. Thanks for watching, Peegyn, and I will see you guys in the next story.